Welcome. If you are just joining us, we are excited to have you here. I am the substitute teacher for this week, so we know that it's always best to be nice to substitutes. So Matthew will be joining us again next week, but he is at a fun family celebration this week, so we are going to try our best to do justice to this wonderful webinar series that he has put together. So tonight we're going to be talking about additional teaching resources and inspiration that you might be able to find in teaching and learning with Tinkercad. So we are hoping that you can light up the chat right now, and we're asking you a question that's kind of a theme of next week's episode. I won't give it away quite yet, but we're asking you, what's your next step for teaching or learning with Tinkercad? So please tell us in the chat. My name is Kellyanne Mahoney. I'm a youth program specialist at
I might have to turn the chat on, Kellyanne. How do I do that?
The chat should be on for everybody.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Yeah. They're lighting it up now, right?
Thank you.
And Elena is the trusty co-host and also link fairy tonight, who is going to be watching the chat, and please interrupt me too if there are interesting questions or comments that are happening in the chat. Any fun next steps, Selena, before we get started?
I have teaching 3D design for 3D printing, nice. Creating classes to teach other teachers.
Oh, cool. We're going to cover that tonight too.
We have hello from Korea. Nice to have you.
It's so amazing, the worldwide audience that we have. And we're going to actually be sharing some design challenges that are international tonight. So we hope that this will provide you with some inspiration for teaching your students all over the world. So please keep using the chat to not just connect with us, but to connect with each other and encourage each other to take that next step. Sometimes it's a big leap, so we hope that you do so.
Great. We have Jill Harris too, who yesterday just got her board approved Tinkercad. So now they're on the approved list.
Oh, very cool. Very exciting. So big steps.
Yes, congrats, Jill.
Yay. So here are all the fine folks that are with you tonight. Again, Matthew is not with us tonight, but he will be back next week. But everyone else is here, and we're all here to support you. So please know that we want to keep the chat going with connecting with us and connecting with each other. And again, Elena is going to be sharing some useful links with you in the chat. But if you want your questions answered in real time, maybe it's even like a specific question that's specific to your school or your class, or even one of your students, please use the Q&A feature. That would be the best way for you to get your question answered right away. And all these fine cast of characters will be here to help you in the Q&A as well. So we are coming up, Elena and I were actually, when we were rehearsing, we were like, should we play like Boys to Men, End of the Road? Because we're feeling like it's a journey that we've been on with you, and we're getting close to the end. So tonight we are going to be talking about additional Tinkercad resources for teachers. And next week, we're going to finish it off with leveling up with Fusion 360. So do please stay engaged with us even after this series. But this is the second to last episode. And tonight we're hoping to provide you with some inspiration. We've been listening to your questions and comments throughout previous episodes and trying to kind of address some of those in this episode tonight. So we've already been hearing tonight as well. We heard this last week that you're interested in resources to also do PD with your colleagues at your school and teaching them how to use Tinkercad, which is awesome. So I'm going to share with you a fun starter project that you could do either with your colleagues or with your students. We'll be sharing some other project ideas, some fun design challenges, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen next week. And we don't have a class code tonight, but we do have a fun hands-on activity. So Elena will be sharing that. So just to begin with inspiration, and when we think about inspiration, our ultimate inspiration is always students. And what we know about our students is that they are dissatisfied with the status quo. So students, as we know, like to ask a lot of questions. And when we're teaching students, we want to think about, what are some of the questions they're asking us? And particularly, how could they use Tinkercad in order to answer those questions? So maybe they're asking, how can I innovate to design and make a better world? And when we hear that word innovate, they're talking about basically like, how can I make progress now? We know students today, Generation Z, and also the next one is Generation Alpha, really are really caring about problems that are happening in the world, and they don't feel like there's time in order to wait around and answer them. When they see design and make, particularly at Autodesk, we think about three industries that we support around kind of this design and make concept. So design for manufacturing and assembly, architecture, engineering, construction, and media and entertainment. And then getting back to those students of yours, we know that they are connectors. It's almost like inherent to them to make connections. For example, at Autodesk, we think about, how can the construction industry learn from the manufacturing industry in order to build buildings more efficiently or do it more safely. But for our students, these connections are already kind of second nature. So they're already thinking about the convergence across industries, for example, virtual reality and, manufacturing, for example. We also know that collaboration is second nature to them. They think like, why would I have to do this alone? Why can't I work with my peers in order to solve problems? They also realize that in order to solve some of these big problems that we're facing in this world, it requires a diversity of perspectives that doesn't exist, unfortunately, right now in a lot of the industries that we support that we're talking about. We also think of our students as curious doers. They like to get hands-on. They learn through making things and vice versa. They think of learning as an iterative process. And they also see problems as opportunities. So yeah, there's a lot of problems in the status quo right now, but there are also opportunities to do things better. And they're caring. So they care about issues like environmental sustainability, making sure when they're designing and making things that they're doing that for all people so that all people have access to them. And then getting back to what we have to offer at Autodesk and through Tinkercad is what we're oftentimes thinking about is when students start in Tinkercad, where are the places that they can go with it? So we're going to get into this a little bit next week when we talk about the pathway from Tinkercad to Fusion 360. So if they design a car in Tinkercad, then can they, add chamfers and fillets and cross section and apply physical materials and render what it is that they designed? If they're designing, a dream house or a dream room, then once they turn 13, they could access some other free tools, like, for example, this is Formit, and thinking about how they might think like architects, but also think computationally when they're doing it. They might use code blocks to design a bridge. And then when they turn 13, they might access InfraWorks, which is part of our civil engineering software suite. And they might think about, well, if I placed that bridge in a real location, could I use publicly accessible data in order to run a traffic simulation on my bridge and to kind of evaluate, is that a good location for it? One of my favorite parts of Tinkercad, and I think that Elena would agree with me, is it really kind of puts the arts in STEM. My background is not in technology. I was an English teacher actually for 13 years prior to joining Autodesk. I studied art in college. So I just really think it helps put the A in STEAM. It helps students see that STEM is a vehicle for expression and creativity, and that they can even level up within Tinkercad. So here's an example of in Tinkercad, how you could use the augmented reality feature to even immerse yourself in your design and interact with it. And then if they get super into that, they might, once they turn 13, want to try out Maya, which is one of our computer animation softwares. And maybe they're taking their character, but then they're adding like rigging to it and jointing it and thinking about how it might move. So I feel like another subtitle to this episode could be there's a teacher resource for that. So every time that I was in the chat in previous episodes in the series, I was thinking like, I'm like the little blue guy who's like thinking about, oh, we have a link for that. And it makes me so proud of the team that we work with. For example, Nicole, who's always writing these awesome blog posts with really important knowledge and information for teachers. So if you like that idea of the using augmented reality as an extension to the create an avatar lesson plan that's in Tinkercad, there's actually a blog post for that. So whenever you see a little star in the slideshow and we send it to you later, it actually links to an instructional resource. So I think that Elena is going to put that in the chat if she hasn't yet already.
Yeah, I'll be linking them live for you as you go through.
Thank you so much, Elena. So just to kind of begin to continue this pep talk, if you're feeling nervous about teaching Tinkercad, these are top 10 reasons you got this. So for example, number 10, one of the things that you should think about when you're integrating a new technology into your teaching, be it Tinkercad or anything else, you don't need to be the expert you don't need to know all the things about Tinkercad. I know that Matthew's done a valiant job of teaching you how to kind of begin with a lot of the different environments within Tinkercad and the features, but you don't need to know all the nooks and crannies and ins and out in order to be able to get started. And learning along with students is half the fun. Also, just don't think that, for example, I work a lot in my work in Boston with architects, and architects are always kind of back and forth between designing things digitally, but they also really love to get hands-on with paper and sketching and, building things out of paper. So don't throw your craft supplies away if you're teaching with Tinkercad. Include it as kind of part of the process. So they could, try to design it first in paper or sketch it out, and then go to Tinkercad and try to recreate it in Tinkercad, or vice versa, and think about like, what is the constructability of their design once they've designed it in Tinkercad. Also, and I know that this is a tough one for teachers, but it's okay for students to explore the Tinkercad gallery. The chair that I'm sitting on is like the millionth iteration of what a chair could be. So it's okay for students to, take designs from the Tinkercad gallery and make them their own. I think this is especially true of the CodeBlocks environment. I learned how to use Tinkercad by watching YouTube. So we have our own YouTube channel, but there's also just so many teachers in the Tinkercad community who make really great videos. And that's sometimes even today when I'm thinking about something that I want to design and I can't quite figure out how I want to do it, I'll search it on YouTube. And chances are I'll be able to find it. And our students learn that way too. Also, don't overthink it. We have these very, intricate, really well thought out lesson plans and projects that you have access to. But even I'm thinking about like if you're an engineering teacher, sometimes it's just like, build the tallest structure without it falling over, or, the longest structure without the middle touching the ground. So it could be a simple prompt. It makes me think back to Matthew's example of the little elephant that needed to get to the gift to cross the river. And it's just design something that, could be open-ended. So just design something to help the little elephant get the gift. So, maybe it's a bridge, maybe it's a boat, maybe it's a helicopter. So you could just start with a very simple prompt. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Also, this kind of gets back to number 10, which is get your students collaborating, because if you don't know the answer to a question, chances are if they're buddied up with someone else or they're working together, at a table with other students, they might be able to answer each other's questions. And that's when the real learning happens, is when students are actually able to teach each other. Keep the focus on the process, not the product. So, encourage students to even screenshot, along the way as they're working on their designs. Encourage them to share their designs not at the end, but kind of throughout the process with each other for critique and feedback and questions. And this, I've already kind of said this, but just to reiterate, check in with students throughout the process, not just at the end. So that's where the beauty happens, and that's actually where a lot of the fun happens as well. You don't need a 3D printer in order to teach with Tinkercad. We love 3D printers. We know that they make things really fun. Even if you have access to like tons of filament and the most amazing 3D printer, you may not want to actually even 3D print every project that students make as well. And we do have some examples tonight from the Tinkercad teaching community around different ideas and ways of making, even if you don't have a 3D printer. And last but not least, number 1, you're doing this already. You're connecting with each other now. So do make sure that even if you're the only teacher at your school who's teaching with Tinkercad, that you seek out other teachers either through webinars, through social media, checking out your local public library, or meeting with other teachers across your district. Make sure you connect with each other. And we're going to give you some opportunities to do that tonight in the chat very soon. Elena is putting in the chat right now. It's a blog post that Nicole recently wrote. I think it came out this week. It's kind of more logistical tips for teaching with Tinkercad, but I think it's a nice complement to kind of some of these kind of bigger picture ideas. And as we're transitioning into the next section, we want you to connect with each other. So please share in the chat, what's your biggest fear or challenge in teaching with Tinkercad? So please let us know. Anything happening so far, Elena, in the chat that's worth noting?
No, I haven't gotten anything come through just yet, which we know those fears exist. So someone just kind of wrote in and said they're just not familiar yet with it. So I guess building up that confidence. Circuits, which I'm sure is a fear. I think there's a big jump between going into code blocks or going into circuits. And so that's one that Laura, you are not alone, but it is not as hard as you think it is. And especially with Tinkercad's platform, it really is intuitive. Sculpting, another circuits, getting students to love the design process as much as wanting to print.
It's a very philosophical, fundamental exploration that we have with students, I think, no matter what we're teaching.
Fear that kids will get frustrated and lose the fun element and their motivation to continue working.
I love teachers who care about fun, by the way. They're my favorite teachers. They're the ones that help me learn.
Another one here that I'm sure is a fear of many teachers, and one I've heard not just with Tinkercad, but the fear of your students coming up with really amazing or great questions that you're not quite ready to answer yet, or your skill level isn't quite there. And I think, Kellyanne, you touched on that in a great way of have them collaborate with each other, kind of figure it out. It's one of the beauties of a platform like Tinkercad is there's not always just one solution. There's many ways to attack the problem.
And there's a lot of answers on Google as well.
Oh, good old friend Google.
That's what I would do if I didn't know the answer. Right, so
yeah, they're coming in fast. I can't keep up with all of them.
Good. Well, you are definitely doing number one, which is the keeping connected with other innovators. All right, so next, just in thinking about starter projects, sometimes our biggest fear or challenge is just like, how do I get started? I'm going to share with you a little kind of activity that you can do around making a cake in Tinkercad as just kind of a fun starter activity. But I also just kind of wanted to emphasize here too, like just like making a cake, it seems like something that is simple, but it also has all these kind of opportunities to add layers and layers of complexity. Similar to Tinkercad. Tinkercad is, as you've probably realized in exploring it, it's something that can be very simple, but it also is a platform for you to be able to engage in really deep generative topics with students. So fairness and measurement, symmetry, patterns, organic and geometric shapes, even just kind of the design thinking process. And it also helps you dig into really interesting essential questions as well, like how can we balance efficiency in fairness and dividing resources, or how do artists use math and symmetry to create compositions? So this is the activity that we're going to be sharing tonight, which is Are You the Next Star Baker, which is the my great Tinkercad bake-off ripoff. And this is something that you can do with your students, or you could do this as a professional development with other teachers. And it's a way to kind of connect, like oftentimes when we're trying to make those interdisciplinary connections with teachers on our grade level teams, is really kind of getting to the heart of, oftentimes as an English teacher, I would try to collaborate with the math teacher on my team. And the math teacher was so kind of had their minds just on the curriculum and all the things that they needed to cover that sometimes it was hard to kind of, get teachers in other subject areas to want to collaborate with one another. So sometimes that requires personal connection. So this could be a fun prompt to do with teachers at your school. Maybe ask them the question, who is the person that most inspired you to pursue the subject that you teach? And then you might ask them to design a cake that honors that person and tells a story of how they help spark your passion. So this is an opportunity to teach Tinkercad to your colleagues at your school, but it's also an opportunity for you to kind of learn more about kind of what makes their hearts sing, which I think is the first step to really great interdisciplinary collaboration. You could also do this challenge with students. For example, maybe you'll have students research STEM heroes and then create a cake that celebrates and honors them, but also kind of includes examples of the research that they did on these STEM heroes' lives. We were also asked last week about easy 3D printing projects that you could do with students. So maybe it's not a cake, maybe it's a cake topper, and that's something kind of small that you could easily 3D print. So this folder of resources, or this DIY toolkit, includes all types of resources that are kind of based on kind of just different skills that you can learn in Tinkercad, but they include also demonstration videos as well that kind of take you through these kind of step-by-steps, how to place objects, how to move them, how to rotate. And you might even start the teachers in your professional development or the students that you're working with just with these kind of basic tutorials in Tinkercad. So there are these video resources. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the first one is just kind of how to stack things in Tinkercad, which is appropriate for making a cake as well. There are videos where you can talk over them like I am right now, like this is how you change the color in Tinkercad. And this is how you kind of adjust the parameters. There's also a voiceover narration of me kind of talking you through the videos as well, if that makes you more comfortable to use. So it also includes fun extension questions. So after they've learned how to, stack the shapes and take a slice, so subtract from the cake, how could you make the inside of the cake chocolate? So these extension questions kind of, this is actually not quite as simple of a task as the question makes it sound like, or the image makes it sound like. So there are some extension questions, particularly for those really quick learners that you have that might need an extra thing to do while the other students are kind of trying to figure things out. So this is what it looks like when you open up the folder. Elena is going to share the link with you to the folder. So in addition to the slideshow, the voiceover narration, there's also some fun flashcards. So there's other resources in the folder as well to help you along that you might even share with your colleagues or students. So just, to give you a sense of some of the lessons in it or the activities, there's how to frost the cake, how to top the cake, how to decorate the cake. There's also some really kind of getting fancy and getting a little bit more advanced in your designing. And there's also a little section on how to code, so how to include computational design or code blocks in your cake design. And within these little fun activities or lessons, there's also some really important skills that they learn along the way. So the work plane tool, or how to use the duplicate shortcut, or even smart duplicate, how to import SVGs, how to access shapes in the shapes library, how to use the scribble shape, which is my favorite shape, how to add creations to your shapes library, and also how to move between the code blocks editor and the 3D editor. So there are skills that'll kind of instantly wow students, as you see here. And it also includes skills that's kind of going to push them and kind of encourage them to develop their muscles and their skills. So for example, adding your creations to the shapes library is not just kind of a fun thing to be able to do, but you can also start getting into, talking to students about modular design and why you might want to think in kind of a modular way as you are designing and kind of building up your shapes library. Also, moving between the code blocks editor and the 3D editor might help you, to have a conversation with students about why you might want to use computational design for one, to address one problem, and then why, using the 3D editor is a better tool for, another purpose. There's also, ways of extending this into, deeper conversations or just kind of more exciting conversations about like 3D printing food, for example, or, what other foods might you want to 3D print or that you might want to 3D design, or even just, conversations around math, like about Boolean operations, for example. Also silly questions, like, for example, could a robot make a pancake? And with a little suspense, We will find out the answer to that question right now. So the answer is yes. As you can see from the reaction, this is actually at the Autodesk Technology Center in Boston. But you should know, because I was actually there that day when they did this, is it took them 5 tries to get it right. But fun video. If you do design a cake in Tinkercad, please share it. So these are all the different ways that you can share with us. And you can also share this project with each other. So don't forget that you can collaborate on design. So you could co-create a cake with one of your colleagues, or students could do that together as well. Just some other resources for professional development for Tinkercad. These are a little bit older, but they're still kind of timeless, I think. So this is from the Tinkercad for Education Instructables account. A few years ago, I created these resources for educators. Well, some of these are for educators. So this one in particular, which is a teacher professional development around design thinking. So there's step-by-step instructions, there's skills that are taught, it could be taught in a modular way. So there's, kind of step-by-step parts to it that you can kind of pick and choose what's, most useful for the people that you're working with. So there's a shared folder of resources, and it really kind of takes you step-by-step through the process. And in addition, there's another one that I did that is on, it's kind of taking that layer of design thinking and then integrating Tinkercad into it. So just like the lesson plans, there's also, worksheets and vocabulary. And there's also like graphic organizers that provide you with a good framework with like prompts, for example, to take your colleagues through these steps of learning design thinking. And throughout, they also reinforce just kind of the design thinking mindset as well, and how to develop it, and also why it's a really great mindset to apply to problems that we face in schools. So here's just another question to kind of get you talking in the chat. So what's your go-to Tinkercad starter project, or what do you plan as your first project? Maybe you've taught it already and you're in the middle of teaching it. But what's a good first kind of starter project that you do in Tinkercad?
We have keychains, 5-minute house builds, avatar, a lot of keychains coming in, Christmas ornament, create something with your name on it.
So these are all things that are easy to print as well. So teachers who are new to Tinkercad, who are in the chat, please, learn from your fellow Tinkercad community here, because these are kind of easy kind of 3D print projects too, which is really kind of instant gratification for students who are learning 3D design for the first time with you.
We have a self-portrait, microscope holder for your phone. It's biology.
Oh, nice. So functional items.
Cookie cutters. Oh, these are great. Using the scribble tool to handwrite your name.
Ooh, I like that. I actually made my signature and scribble and sign something with it once.
Ooh, I hope it was something super professional.
I think it was some sort of a certificate that I was giving out for Tinkercad PD.
Lots and lots of great ideas coming in the chat. I would encourage everyone to kind of scan through those to get some inspiration for your own classrooms.
Nice. So keep that inspiration flowing in the chat, and we're going to try to keep it flowing as well with talking about some other project ideas. So I would be remiss to not mention that in our new beautifully redesigned Tinkercad website, there actually is a section on projects that is searchable. I know Matthew talked about this last week, but I thought it was relevant to bring up again, is that you can search these projects by grade level. You can search them by subjects. You can also search them by the different environments. So you can toggle to 3D design, to circuits, and also to code blocks. In addition, we also do have a Teaching with Tinkercad series that you can binge watch if you're missing webinars after the series is over, that we've been creating and presenting over the past few years. So last week, some participants suggested that we also include the voices of teachers who have done these projects before for kind of advice and guidance. And that was actually the essence of this series that I think we will continue again this year at some point. So some of them are oldies but goodies. So this is really back in the vaults from, I think this is 2017 or 2018. But we did this really great episode called Making Learning More Accessible with Tinkercad. We covered the group of teachers that we included in this episode that you can kind of see their little faces behind me. The projects that they presented ranged from grades 3 all the way up to university. They covered topics like 3D design and 3D printing. But I think the thread that kind of came through the most, particularly because this group of educators were also all members in different ways of the disabilities community, they really kind of reinforced this concept of when you're doing things like having students design assistive technology, that they're doing it with the people who have disabilities in some way and not for them. And that was something that kind of came through all of their projects, this concept of designing with. So one of those teachers was Rich Lair. I think he's a principal now, actually. But the school he was teaching at the time was called Brookwood. Teachers last week also said that they wanted some problem solving activities to do with students. Well, his school had a problem bank. And what they did is they collaborated with community partners to source problems that students could solve through 3D design and printing. So one of their more active partners was actually like an assisted living community for senior citizens. So they would come up with all types of problems that the students could solve with 3D design and printing. They also solve problems within their school community. So one of the students in their school was a first grader who's probably in high school now, who has a limb difference. And the students in his class and he wanted to come up with different ways that he could more fully engage with classroom activities. So they did it together as a project and they scanned his limb. And then they came up with all these different types of prosthetics that were kind of modular that they could use in order for him to kind of test out and engage more fully in the classroom. Another kind of more lighthearted problem that they encountered was the problem of when you're missing board game pieces. So Rich came up with this idea of he called it the World Peace Project, where students would learn about measurement as well. Like they had calipers out and people would give them board game pieces that they were missing and they would measure them and try to recreate them. So it was a fun activity that involved 3D printing, but also measurements. So another kind of one of the older episodes that I wanted to highlight was Sparking Future Makers with Tinkercad. So Becky was in that one in which she talked about Arduino. We will see her again. So these projects were kind of grades 6 through 12, 3D design, but also Arduino, social studies, and engineering. And the teachers that we featured were Rosa Weinberg and Nisha McCrae. And they worked together on a project, and it was kind of a social studies project in which students researched heroes in different neighborhoods across kind of the Boston area. And then they kind of came up with these really fun, it was an English assignment too, because they came up with these like fictional narratives about these heroes where they, for example, one of them was this woman from Jamaica Plain who was a butterfly researcher, but she's a Latina woman and she's working in science. So in interviewing her, they learned that one of the problems that she experiences is microaggressions. So their assignment was then to come up with an electronic wearable that would help her kind of express her superpowers. So in this kind of, speculative design project, she had butterfly wings that would flicker every time she experienced a microaggression. So others, would know about it. And they also went through how they prototyped in Tinkercad and Fusion 360 in order. So they even included their students as part of this episode. So that was a really fun one. That was interesting because it's, ELA, history, and engineering, which was pretty cool. Another more recent one was this one that we called Resources that Make Learning Fun and Your Job Easier. This addressed coding, 3D design, and art. It was kind of more of like a middle school to high school project. It featured our friend, Mr. Stephen Jones, who He focused his project on, he's actually teaching in the Washington, D.C. area. So he wanted his students to really kind of look around and notice the architecture in their community, particularly architecture that seemed to have some sort of like a coding influence. He called it coded architecture. So one of the buildings that they zoomed in on was the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is part of like the Smithsonian museums and this, really interesting architectural detail. And he thought, well, how could we, study it and sort of recreate it using Tinkercad code blocks? So he went through Tinkercad. As you can see in the middle, there is the original, and then on the right side is the 3D print. And then he encouraged his students to then kind of, make it their own and learn from that and kind of continue to iterate. So Stephen's always great with awesome creative code blocks activities. Another one was making hands-on work in a digital world. This covered a lot of grade levels, so grades K through 12. It covered 3D design, electronics, engineering, science. The two teachers that we featured, it's worth noting their schools have significant populations of students on special education plans or English learners. And they did this episode in the midst of COVID as well. So they're really talking about how they were making it work, even teaching, doing distance learning. So this was Mika Solo in Panyon Tassi. So Mika began by, she had just learned Tinkercad that summer and she was really excited to share it with her students. So she's actually a K through 12 technology integration specialist at her school. So she started out with just kind of a simple sort of design thinking project where she gave students different personas and then had them design chairs, specifically for that persona. From there, they moved on to the create an avatar lesson plan. So this was a kind of a good episode too, of like, you've seen the lesson plans and you've thought like, I think I might like to teach that, but I'd like to hear from a teacher who did it first. She did that. She also taught the biomimicry lesson. So this was some of the student work from the biomimicry lesson. So I was excited to see that. And then Panyon talked about how he used both, he teaches high school, he's a computer science teacher. And he teaches both Tinkercad and also Fusion 360. So that's what the student is actually working on here. And he challenged his students to redesign their learning environment. So they didn't just redesign it like on computers, they actually then learned how to like build it with like real hand tools and, made it real. And in part of that process of making it real, he taught them some electrical engineering concepts along the way. When they wanted to put in LED lights, for example, like they really did it and they learned about how to do it. He also did a fun project with his teaching team. It was around the concept of resistance. So thinking about resistance in English language arts, but also resistance, the concept of resistance in electrical engineering. So that was really interesting to learn about from Panyon. Another episode was teaching the A in STEAM. This one was kind of appropriate. The resources that were shared are kind of grades 3 to 8, 3D design, art, and also social studies. We featured teacher Dr. Natrice Gaskins, she's the assistant director of the STEAM lab at Lesley University. So she also does a lot of professional development with teachers. She had actually just recently published a book. So this was her book. And she's also a kind of world-renowned expert on inclusive, culturally relevant maker spaces. So one of the projects that she featured was one around African-American history, the Underground Railroad, and kind of coding within quilts during that time in quilting. So kind of hidden code, hidden messages. And then she encouraged students to work individually on designing kind of tiles or patches for the quilts. And then she did this thing that she called a Tinkercad cipher, where then the students kind of pieced their quilts individually together by collaborating. She also talked about how she uses Tinkercad in her own real life design projects and how she kind of made them real. She's an artist. She was an artist in residence at the Autodesk Technology Center at the time as well. So this is one of the projects she designed in Tinkercad and actually made in real life. Another episode, so getting creative with circuits. I know that circuits is something that gives us a little bit of anxiety. So this episode was also right around the time that we released Microbit within Tinkercad. This episode, was definitely the projects were appropriate for grade 6 all the way up to university. We did microbit, we did Arduino, and we also talked about engineering. And we featured Dory Friedman, who teaches middle school, and also our very own Autodesk alumna extraordinaire, Becky Stern, also participated, and she talked about projects that she did with her college students. So Dory began, she actually gave a little demonstration on how she uses microbit within Tinkercad, which was really cool because it had just come out at the time. And then she talked about this challenge that she did with students, and she was kind of challenging us to do it too, where she was thinking about ways that you could integrate microbit with 3D design by making a pachinko machine. And then Becky shared some fun projects that her college students did in relation to Arduino. And she shared some of her other projects that you can also access too on Becky's Instructables page. Another episode, so we're almost through with this walk through Tinkercad past. So another one was getting started with Tinkercad. This, covered a lot of basics. If you, wanted to hear about classrooms, again, Christian did a really great overview on classrooms. This covered grades 3 through 12. We really got into 3D printing, also talking about different ways of making, so laser cutting, math, and also we had a theater project. And this was by none other than Mr. Rob Morrill, who's a very close friend of the Tinkercad community. He's a math teacher as well. I believe he's middle school is his specialty. And one of the things that we love about Rob is he's a 3D printing expert and kind of an expert in all methods of digital fabrication. But he really thinks about when he's creating projects for teachers that they're accessible kind of with whatever equipment that they might have access to them. So one of them was augmented reality. So he had this cool project where he had students design little parklets in their communities using like real locations and kind of overlaying them. So this was a fun project that does not require a 3D printer at all. And then just even thinking about 3D printing projects that are kind of outside the box. So this was a fun lithopane project that he did that also kind of centered on learning about the history of heroes in STEM. Another one is, if you're teaching plotting in math, like why not, make it creative and have students make really fun, 2D designs, particularly if you're adding code blocks to it. And then could you put it on a t-shirt? So this is another activity that if you have a die cut machine, for example, a Cricut or a Silhouette, you could do that without a 3D printer, and it's quicker than using a 3D printer. And he also shared just some other projects from his Tinkercad blog that he did with us. So this is kind of a nice collection of some of those projects. We did another episode on coding. So Make Code You Can Touch, grade 6 through 12. It covered coding, engineering, and art. It featured Diane Brancazio, who works at MIT Edgerton, and she's also a former classroom teacher. She shared a lot of their awesome projects. If you go on Instructables to the Edgerton Center, you can see a lot of the projects that they've created are centered around Tinkercad code blocks, and they're just like really fun too. That's kind of Diane's kind of motivation when she's teaching is the teacher should be having fun and the kids should be having fun too. So one of those fun projects that she shared was a random daisy generator. As you can see all the possible different outcomes here, but it also taught students about using variables and how using variables allows you to design in flexible ways, particularly if you use that random block, which makes it fun and you can see all the different outcomes. And then she talked about how you could apply that also to ornaments, an ornament project that you could do with students using the random block. And then she talked about some fun kind of hands-on craft projects that she did too. So I think this is the last one. So the next one that we did was interdisciplinary PDL. This featured Shayna Holloway, Sarah Rahman, and Michelle Shalingo. And in this interdisciplinary PBL episode, it was fun because Shayna, I actually taught Tinkercad personally myself, and this was kind of her reaction at first. So it wasn't just an interdisciplinary journey, it was also an emotional journey that she shared. So this was kind of her reaction to learning Tinkercad. And then having to teach it right away to students. So she started with the cake activity. And then she, by the end, she was like teaching circuits. Even this summer, I actually watched the showcase of her students from the camp that she leads, and they were designing electronic wearable devices to address health problems in their community. So she's killing it now, even though she was nervous at first. And then Sarah and Michelle teach together at a middle school. Michelle is a middle school science teacher. And they talked about how their students were motivated by contests. And they based a whole kind of interdisciplinary grade level project on an Instructables contest that we ran called Make It Green. And they thought it was a really great project because their school requires that they integrate the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So they kind of talked about how they kind of took this project and then kind of made it their own. And then, as you can see, they also shared some student work. So their students like designed, agricultural technology devices that integrated 3D design, circuits, and also coding. So that was super fun. So these, if you're interested in those challenges, the contest isn't still running, but the challenges and all the resources are still there. So Make for Everyone was elementary, Make It Green was for middle school, and Make Justice was for high school. So we hope that we've provided you with some inspiration, and we're wondering which of these ideas might you like to try out? Anything happening in the chat, Elena?
So still nothing's rolled. There we go. All of them.
All of them. Awesome. Perfect.
The cake challenge, or not the cake challenge, well, the great Tinkercad Bake Off, I guess.
That one's really fun.
Circuits and 3D printing combo, augmented reality.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I failed to say too, when I was trying to come up with categories of like grade level and, like subject area, these are flexible. Like you're a professional, you know how to adapt things and, pick and choose from different places in order to make it your own for, what's right for your students at this time.
And I think it's worth noting that you've kind of you have cherry picked some of the webinars episodes, but there are many, many more that you didn't cover here.
Yes, I couldn't cover all of them. I felt like it was a bit exhaustive at some point, but Elena said they're good ideas, so keep it going.
The quilt got a special call out from Gigi.
Yeah, and Natrice says, I think Matthew shared it before, but Natrice Gaskins, her Instructables page, she has all types of really great projects, and they're particularly around middle school standards, but they cover all subject areas, so they're really great. She's also won a couple Instructables contests, so she likes to participate. So just moving on to this next section on fun design challenges. So if you maybe even were inspired by Sarah and Michelle kind of taking that Instructables contest and bringing it to her students. One that's happening right now that I think is really fun. Every year we collaborate. So this is an international competition. We collaborate with Airbus and the European Space Agency in this MoonCamp challenge. So if you go to this website, it's not just mooncampchallenge.org, and Alina's, I'm sure, pushing out the link right now in the chat. It isn't just the challenge. They've been doing this for several years. So there's all types of learning resources on the site. It's like a really inspiring story. So it's already opened, but just recently. So you're learning about it just as it's opened, and it closes in April. So it's something nice that you could do with your students throughout the year. There are prizes. So winning teams can win a 3D printer and also the opportunity to participate in a live webinar with a European Space Agency astronaut. So these are the different levels. And even if your students are in high school and just starting Tinkercad, there's a category for them. So MoonCamp Discovery is up to 19 years old. And then they also encourage students that if they are 13 or older to use Fusion 360 in their designs. And they also have, inspiring examples from previous competitions. So you can see students use both Fusion 360 and also Tinkercad in their designs. And it's just also fun to see all the different countries throughout the world that participated. Like one of these winners is from China, another is from Honduras. So it's really cool for students to feel like they're participating in something that's global as well. Another challenge that we have collaborated on in the past is the Makeable Challenge, which usually launches in November. It's an assistive technology design challenge. It is brought to you by Print Lab, which is an organization that's really great that creates instructional resources for teachers, that's based in London. And it takes you through in designing assistive technology with people with disabilities. It also kind of takes you through this kind of design thinking, and your students through this design thinking framework, which is really great to learn. Here's some examples of past winners. So you can see it's both 3D design and also fabricating, so printing. And this is where you can find the Makeable Challenge. So another one that's more homegrown within Autodesk is the Make It Real Challenge. This is a program that I manage, and I'm actually technically on the construction team at Autodesk. And one of the things that I'm always thinking about is how students, again, where they can go with the skills that they learn in Tinkercad, and particularly how can they apply those skills to career paths. So the Make It Real Challenge, which we will be doing again this year at some point, we are oftentimes thinking about, and this was the question that kind of drove the program last year, was how can young people find purpose and make a difference through careers in the construction industry? So you'll see if you go to Autodesk /Make It Real, Autodesk.com/Make It Real, you can actually see this web series that we developed in collaboration with James Devlin, who is a 3-time Super Bowl champion, who also has an interest in entrepreneurship and environmental sustainability. And he actually invites students sort of into the process of the challenge. So this year's challenge was around coming up with reusing a shipping container or some other type of material that they could upcycle into a way to address a problem in their community. And he takes you through these little mini episodes where you meet the people along the way that helped him make his vision real. So this was the contest page. Again, this contest is closed now. However, we did give away $50,000 in scholarship prizes to high school students. And even though the contest is closed, I encourage you to check out the page for inspiration and even have your students check it out, because we do have the winners and all of the student entries are at the bottom of the page, and they are super inspiring. As you can see here, they used all types, they used Tinkercad, they used some of our more professional tools as well. And their designs showed CAD skills, but they also showed this like caring, about issues like designing affordable housing. Another one was thinking about healthier learning spaces and addressing problems in their communities. And again, it's not just about the final product. If you go through their entries and they're written as instructables, they talk about kind of their process along the way as well, and even illustrate it. So through exploding views, writing, sketches, and really kind of, think about how you could use modular design, for example, to design things not just more efficiently, but also design in ways that are better for the environment. So this is our fun. So we don't have a class code this week, but this is our fun hands-on activity that we're giving to you, which is this. Most of the students, even the student winners, began in Tinkercad, and they got this file in Tinkercad. So we're sharing the link with you right now. You can copy and tinker it. So there's these 2 shipping containers, and you can delete the notes that are there, as you can see. There's 2, so one is like all one part, and this one is multiple parts. So you can play with it. You can think about even doing the Make It Modular Challenge yourself. So you can duplicate that shipping container. You can, this one I just want to show you is the one on the right side. You can actually kind of take it apart. So you can rotate. So please take all the skills that you've learned from Matthew throughout this series and make it your own. So you can use the 3D editor, you can use the Shapes library, you can even integrate code into your design, as you can see here. So that's our fun hands-on activity. We hope you have fun with it. So you do have that file now. And you can check out autodesk.com/Make It Real for more inspiration. In following up, we do want to encourage you. So contests are fun for teachers too. So we are still running the Teach with Tinkercad contest. Prizes totaling $5,000. There's less than 2 weeks left. So we do encourage you to participate in this contest. We also encourage you to connect with us, connect with each other on social. So Elena is pushing out the link for the Tinkercad teachers community. We also just thought that this, as we are coming to the end of the road, you might want to share even your own, social media account with each other, or if you want to share in the chat some educational social media accounts that you follow for inspiration. So please, this chat is your chat, so please feel free to share, accounts that you find inspirational, or even if you want others to follow some of the cool stuff that you're doing. So next week is the season finale. So we're going to be leveling up with Fusion. It's going to feature Guillermo Melantoni, who's the director of project management at Tinkercad, and he's so cool. It requires two pictures to contain him, but I wanted to show up his Tinkerdad shirt, which is special. So if you want to view previous webinar recordings, to get ready to level up next week, here's the link for you to do so. And now we're just going to, stick around for a little bit to see if you have any questions, reflections, thoughts. We do thank you for attending. We hope that you stay connected with us at Autodesk. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we are in full Brady Bunch mode.
I have a question that came in from Jennifer Love, and she talks about how in her engineering design undergraduate course, they have like a special focus on sundials, and wanted to know if we had any sundial projects or were familiar with any sundial projects. That would be great. Or where to go to search that.
Sundials. I wish Matthew were here this week.
I know.
You could look on the Tinkercad project page. I actually did a quick search and I didn't see any, but I'll keep an eye out and let you know. I will share next week if I do end up finding any.
Another reason to come back next week. It's a great idea too. Other questions or anything that kind of came up in the Q&A or in the chat that might be relevant to the whole audience?
I think there was a lot of there were a lot of links shared in this chat, and I think everybody wants all of them.
So I did. So the slideshow this week, on the very last slide, if you go into the notes, there is a link to the notes document, but I can actually share that with you guys right now if you give me a minute, because I have it open.
Cool.
So this is just like a Google Doc with all the links.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there are quite a few resources pasted in the chat.
Here you go.
Yeah, okay. Probably a good time to grab any links you see in that stream there.
Great. And I see some people, again, the power of community rising to the challenge of sharing some sundials. So thank you.
Awesome.
And then it has another, Brittany has asked if anyone recommends any particular sculpting videos.
Sure, for Fusion 360, we probably have. And I think I bet Guillermo will get into sculpting a little bit next week. Sculpting is definitely something that's kind of more appropriate for when students are 13 or older and ready to get into Fusion 360, which we're going to talk about next week.
Yes, it might be a good opportunity to kind of level up or start using Fusion 360 in that case, if you're looking for sculpting content.
There was also like a fun project that I've seen in the past where it was like a Chimera project where students uploaded STL files of things that kind of look sculpted, but then kind of mashed them up and put them together. I feel like the Smithsonian collection would be fun for that too, that's within Tinkercad, to kind of make surrealist sculptures.
Brittany, you've won my heart over with you're working on a model of your cat right now from an SVG.
Totally not offended if you're 3D modeling your cat right now. That's important work. Anything
just
else before we
Lots
sign
of
off?
thank yous, Kellyanne. I think people are excited for all the resources. This is a really, really great, I think, especially for those, I think at the beginning, a lot of people were talking about wanting to be the ambassador for Tinkercad and kind of onboarding or teaching other people around them. And so I think this has really been wonderful, I hope. But based on all the thank yous you're getting, I'm going to assume it was a great success.
Well, it's been a community effort to put together all of those resources over the years. So I love that Brittany is continuing to tell us about her cat model. And also, yeah, it was a great point with sundials that it's a great trigonometry project as well. I recently was in touch with my geometry teacher from high school, and I was telling him that it was like when I finally understood math and the point of it, because we're actually like dealing with like real physical things. Like I got excited about like how long the shadow is with the tree, you know, like I could picture it. So
who reached out to who, Kellyanne? Did you get famous enough that your trigonometry teacher reached out to you?
An alumni Facebook group with my high school, and he was also my track coach as well. So he cared about my grades enough that I needed to pass geometry. So.
Right. Well, chat looks like it's slowing down. Just yeah.
Oh, great. So people are coming back next week. So that's good. So my substitute report, I think, will be all aces for Matthew for next week. So Matthew will be back next week. He's going to be here to introduce Guillermo. So we are so excited that you joined us, that you're continuing to join us, and we hope to see you next week. But we're going to sign off for now by doing an awkward wave, because that's what we do at the end. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care, and we will see you next week.